بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا مولانا المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Last time we discussed the five legal rulings and the additional attributes that a ruling could have such as صحيح, باطل, قضاء, أداء, and so on and so forth. We are still discussing bits of the definition of fiqh. So, first class or 2 classes ago, we discussed the definition of fiqh according to the author. al-Fiqh معرفة الأحكام الشرعية التي طريقها الاجتهاد, which is knowledge. Fiqh is knowledge of the legal rulings which are reached through ijtihad. Now, last time, so in that definition, knowledge of legal rulings. So last time we discussed legal rulings, now we're discussing knowledge. Now, fiqh, according to the conventional definition, is what we just went over, at least according to the definition of al-Imam al-Juwayni. There are other definitions, but they do not make a difference regarding, for our purposes, basically. It's all the definitions will lead to the same end. So we discussed the legal rulings, now we're discussing knowledge. So fiqh, according to conventional ruling, is what we just read. However, fiqh in the Arabic language, so outside of any context regarding usul al-fiqh or knowledge or any specific field such as logic or kalam, fiqh is just understanding. So you ask someone, أتفقه العربية? Meaning, do you understand Arabic? So fiqh is just understanding. Some linguists will say that fiqh is detailed understanding, but again, that's outside of our scope. So the author here says, وَالْفِقْهُ أَخَصُّ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. Fiqh is more specific than knowledge, meaning knowledge encompasses fiqh, but fiqh does not encompass knowledge. Now this, based off the matan alone, based off the text of the author alone, is not clear and could be understood incorrectly. And the reason is what we just said. Fiqh is just understanding. Knowledge, according to the conventional definition of the people of logic and the people of usul al-fiqh, العلم هو الإدراك الجازم المطابق للواقع. It is the realization with certainty that is similar to reality. Meaning, if I say that Allah is one, this is something that I realized with certainty, and it is in accordance with reality. If I say, for example, or let's not say that I say, let's say that the philosophers said that the universe is eternal. Now, the philosophers, according to their, incorrect understanding, they would say that we have a realization and we have certainty that the universe is eternal, that it doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end. This is not in accordance with reality, according to, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So we would say that this is not called knowledge, even though that they've reached this conclusion with logic, and it's faulty logic, sure, but they have used logic, they've used some form of reasoning to reach this conclusion. And they obviously have studied and they are knowledgeable people, the philosophers, but this is not called this specific conclusion. We cannot say this is knowledge. We say this is ignorance. And ignorance, as is defined, is to imagine something differently than what it is. So these conventional meanings are different than how we use them linguistically, so, arguably at least. Someone who uses their knowledge to reach an incorrect conclusion in day-to-day life, in the usual way we speak, we do not call him ignorant. We just say he made a mistake, or we use different types of word and ways to describe it. But for the purposes of usul al-fiqh and the purposes of logic within the Islamic tradition, ignorance is any realization or idea in the mind that is different from what is um, what it is in reality. Now, fiqh is just understanding. It's fiqh. Al-fiqh هو الفهم or الفهم الدقيق. It's understanding or detailed understanding. Fiqh could be with certainty, it could be without certainty. Fiqh could be, sorry, so fahm, if we look at fiqh according to the linguistic definition, which is to understand, understanding can be with certainty, without certainty. It can be similar to reality and can be without, it could be incorrect, it could be um, not in accordance with reality. So if you look at it from this angle, if we look at the linguistic definition, then fiqh is more general than knowledge, because knowledge is a specific type of understanding. Knowledge is the realization with certainty that is in accordance with reality. Fiqh encompasses that and encompasses other things. So if we look at it from this angle, then the sentence of the author isn't necessarily correct, because he says jurisprudence is more specific, fiqh is more specific than knowledge, which is the opposite of what we just said. And so the only way to understand this is to say that he's talking about the conventional meanings. So if we look at the conventional meaning of fiqh, which is that according to the definition of al-Imam al-Juwayni, معرفة الأحكام الشرعية التي طريقها الاجتهاد. This is a specific branch under knowledge. Now again, we said knowledge is realization with certainty. And we already discussed before that fiqh by its nature is not a knowledge of certainty, it's a knowledge of speculation, because it's a knowledge of ijtihad. And we discussed the answer to this in the first class. And if you do not remember, you can go back to the recording. Now, ilm and jahl are not the only logical definitions we need to know. So there's knowledge, and then there's jahl, and then there's things in between, which we will get to later. Usually in later usul books, they will discuss all five, one by one, but the order that Imam al-Juwayni discusses them in is a little different. Now, the definition of knowledge that Imam al-Juwayni gives is a little different. It's a little older, it's a little less polished. He says, وَالْعِلْمُ مَعْرِفَةُ الْمَعْلُومِ عَلَى مَا هُوَ بِهِ. Knowledge, ilm, is knowing the known thing with accordance to what it is. Now, this is a big problem, because the definition of a word, whatever type of word it is, whatever convention you're using, it cannot contain the word itself. So we're defining ilm, and in this definition, we have the word ma'lum, which is in Arabic we call it mushtaq. It's mushtaq from ilm. It's the word itself, ma'lum. It comes from the word ilm. So we're using the word in the definition of the own word. And this is circular. You can't use this as a definition. Someone doesn't know what the word knowledge means. You say, oh, it's knowing XYZ. You just used the word knowing, which comes from the word knowledge. So your definition is circular. So the person who is reading this definition is probably not going to understand what you're saying. And the truth is that the word ilm, the word knowledge, has been defined in many different ways, and almost all ways have been critiqued. And some scholars later on said that knowledge is not definable. Rather, the definition of knowledge is known by necessity to the human. So the human, by necessity, because every person knows at least something, he understands, he has an internal understanding of knowledge because he knows things. And so the definition of knowledge is known by necessity, and it cannot actually be defined. The closest definition that I've seen, that many later Kalam scholars use, uh, and that does not have any circular definition, is that ilm is an attribute. العلم صفة ينكشف بها حقيقة الأشياء للموصوف به. So knowledge is an attribute which allows the realities of things to be revealed to the person who possesses that attribute. And this is the best definition for two reasons. First of all, it's not circular. Second of all, this definition encompasses created knowledge of mankind and other creatures, and it also encompasses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. So if we discuss the definition of ilm here, al-ilmu ma'rifatu al-ma'lum, the word ma'rifa cannot be used to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge by ijma', by consensus of the scholars. We cannot describe Allah's knowledge with ma'rifa. So even if we were to take Imam al-Juwayni's definition, this definition would be specific to human knowledge. It would not be all knowledge. As for the definition I gave a few seconds ago, it would be allowed to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge as well, because it does not contain the word ma'rifa. And the research into this word can go on forever and ever, but this is the important parts that we need to discuss for now. So, al-ilmu, knowledge is recognizing the thing in accordance to what it is. So, ala ma huwa bih, meaning in accordance with reality. There is another critique regarding this sentence, but it is so detailed and so advanced that it would be pointless to discuss at the moment. والجهل تصور الشيء على خلاف ما هو به. So ignorance is to imagine something or to realize something not in accordance with its reality. So to imagine something different to what it is, such as imagining that the universe is eternal, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a child, as the Christians say. This is ignorance. والعلم الضروري ما لم يقع عن نظر واستدلال. So knowledge has two categories, at least from this perspective. علم ضروري وعلم نظري. So علم ضروري, necessary knowledge, is knowledge that does not happen after thinking and looking for evidence, such as كالعلم الواقع بأحداث الحواس الخمس. So knowledge that is gained through the five senses is necessary knowledge. It doesn't happen through reasoning and thinking, and it cannot be rejected or accepted. If I see a couch, I know that I've seen a couch. Now I could doubt that my senses are healthy. I could say, okay, maybe my senses are healthy. So the correct definition that people later add on is knowledge gained through healthy senses. So people who have sound eyes, their eyes and ears and their five senses, they do not have any faults. If they see something or hear something, then they gain necessary knowledge. This knowledge is called unavoidable knowledge, and it is different than avoidable knowledge, or knowledge that is accepted or rejected based off of reasoning. So what are some other forms of necessary knowledge in terms of the scope of Shari'i sciences, Islamic sciences? There are things which we would later on discuss as قطعي الثبوت. So clear cut in terms of their thubut, in terms of their existence, such as mutawatir reports, as we discuss here. Reports that are mass transmitted, meaning they are reported by such a large number that they are not according to our real conventions of the real world. They cannot be rejected. So if someone comes and tells me, I came from China yesterday, Okay, so I know somebody told me there's something called China. And then a second unrelated person says, oh, did you see what happened to China on the news? And then a third person comes and says, I'm going to China next week. And then a fourth person comes and says something about China. And then another 30 people come and they all say something about China. This is necessary knowledge. In what sense? We don't necessarily have to accept that each person is telling the truth. However, it's mass transmitted, meaning I know by necessity that there is something called China. Now, what is the dalala? What is the understanding of this word and what does it imply? This is something else. But I know by necessity if uh, thousands of Sahaba transmit the Quran, then I know by necessity that the Quran is from a specific source that they narrated from, which is the Prophet ﷺ. Similarly, mutawatir hadith. If I have over 100 Sahaba all narrating the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, من كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار. He who lies upon me on purpose, let him reserve his seat in hellfire. This way that I know by necessity that this hadith was said by the Prophet ﷺ, because there is no logical way to say that every single person from these dozens and dozens, over 100 Sahabis, were all mistaken. And this is something that pops up every now and then on social media from a specific current of uh, people who call themselves scholars, is that they will tell you that ahad hadith uh, will allow you to reach knowledge. We say that الحديث الصحيح يفيد العلم. The sahih hadith, the authentic hadith, its benefit is knowledge. Now, this is problematic because if I have one hadith from one person, even two, maybe, let's say there's two chains of narration, the benefit of this is not knowledge, because knowledge has to be clear cut. We said knowledge is the imagination or realization with certainty. That is in accordance with reality. If I have one hadith, if I have one trustworthy Sahabi come and tell me a specific thing. Sorry, let me just turn my phone on. Okay. If I have one specific Sahabi come and narrate a hadith, even if I know that the Sahabi is truthful, okay, I will believe him, but I will not have clear-cut knowledge, I will not have certain knowledge that that the Prophet ﷺ said X. Because even if he's truthful, he might be forgetful. He might have heard wrong. And there's examples where the Sahaba would not believe other Sahabis in specific things. They would say, no, you heard this wrong or you understood this wrong. Such as the famous example of Umar radiallahu anhu and his son. They narrated from the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet ﷺ said, the person in the grave, if his family is wailing, and wailing, it's to cry in a jahili sense. It's this exaggerated crying, this exaggerated form of mourning, which is forbidden in Islam. They would say that the Prophet ﷺ said, the person in the grave is punished by this sound. Now, Aisha radiallahu anha, al-Mu'mineen, she said that, no, there's no way the Prophet ﷺ said this. Does that mean she's saying Umar is untruthful? No. But she has her reasons, which are outside the scope of this. She said, the Quran rejects this and that you probably heard this wrong or you understood this incorrectly. She said that, no, this hadith, there's no way the Prophet ﷺ said this. So the Sahih hadith, even if it comes from a trustworthy person, we cannot say that it allows us to reach knowledge. It allows us to reach dhann, speculation, which is what we're going to define here. So when someone says that X يفيد العلم in Arabic, that the benefit of this is knowledge, that means that this has to be clear-cut. And if he says that, as some so-called scholars have said, that any hadith which is sahih is qat'i al-thubut and qat'i al-dalala, then hand him al-Waraqat, because that is incorrect. And every single hadith scholar, every single Usuli scholar has said that ilm comes from clear-cut things, whereas dhann comes from non-clear-cut things. So al-ilm al-muktasab, acquired knowledge, is knowledge that is dependent on reasoning. So if I tell you that half of 2 is 1, this is ilm daruri, this is necessary knowledge. But if I tell you that 6 plus 12 divided by 3 is 6, is this necessary knowledge or is it acquired knowledge? This is acquired knowledge, because even though each step is necessary, so 6 plus 12 is 18, okay, that's necessary knowledge, and 18 divided by 3 is 6, that's necessary knowledge. But the process of coming to the conclusion from all these premises is it's not speculative, it's based off of reasoning. It's based off of nazar istidlal, reasoning, and you could define it as ijtihad somehow. It's that the conclusion is necessary, but it is not necessary in terms of knowing it immediately. You need to actually think about it. So this is a different form of knowledge. We have necessary knowledge and then we have acquired knowledge. وأما العلم المكتسب فهو الموقوف على النظر والاستدلال. والنظر, so now he's defining what nazar is, what is to think about and to reason. هو الفكر في حال المنظور فيه والاستدلال طلب الدليل. So nazar is to reflect in the nature or the state of the thing that you are looking at. And istidlal, reasoning, is to seek a dalil, is to seek a is to seek a piece of evidence. والدليل هو المرشد إلى المطلوب لأنه علامة عليه. And a dalil is a guide to the thing that is sought after because it is a sign of it. Now, in the later Usuli tradition, we're going to divide between dalil and amara. Linguistically, dalil can be used for something that is clear-cut or non-clear-cut. But conventionally, later on, we're only going to use dalil for something that gets you to knowledge. So a dalil has to be clear-cut, basically. Whereas something that allows you to reach speculation, it allows you to reach an 80% acceptance of something, we call it an amara, not a dalil. But Imam al-Juwayni does not discuss this because this is something that happens later on in the field. وَالظَّنُّ تَجْوِيزُ أَمْرَيْنِ أَحَدُهُمَا أَظْهَرُ مِنَ الْآخَرِ. So if we have knowledge, which is clear acceptance of something, under that we have dhann, which is 2 things are possible, but one of them is much more likely than the other. So it doesn't actually have to be much more likely, but it has to be more likely. It has to be accepted more than the other. So a Sahabi, only one Sahabi narrates something from the Prophet ﷺ. He says the Prophet ﷺ said XYZ. He's honest. He generally has a good memory. Is it rationally possible that he made a mistake? Yes. But what are the chances? A truthful person with good memory, how often does he make a mistake? Let's say 5%. 5% of the times. Then we have dhann. We have dhann that this person, the Sahabi, narrated the correct thing. So is it rationally possible he made a mistake? Yes, but we're not going to accept it. We're not going to accept this possibility as something to think into. We're not going to accept this as a real probability unless we have another reason. We have, for example, another Sahabi telling us, actually, I think Fulan heard it wrong. Okay, then we're going to look into this 5% possibility, and we're going to seek an evidence. We're going to go into more detail about who is correct. But generally speaking, we accept the more likely scenario. الشك, doubt, تجويز أمرين. So doubt is again, these are all according to the convention of the usulis and the people of logic. They're not linguistic necessarily. Shak is when you have two possibilities and you don't know, there's no more likely one. You don't know which one is, this person makes a mistake 50% of the time. Or let's say 51, 40, it doesn't make a difference, 51, 52%. We don't have a clear acceptance of which possibility is more likely than the other. We say we have shak. It's both shak and dhann are speculation. However, shak is when both possibilities have the same likeliness or likelihood, whereas dhann, one of them is clearly more likely than the other. وعلم أصول الفقه طرقه على سبيل الإجمال وكيفية الاستدلال بها. So we defined this in the first class. We said the knowledge of Usul al-Fiqh. Early on, we discussed the definition of Usul al-Fiqh according to the two words and what happens when you combine them together. We said that Usul are things that things are built upon them, and Fiqh is to know the legal rulings that are sought from ijtihad. And we said so Usul al-Fiqh are what happens when you combine them. We said the conventional definition, the detailed definition in the field, according to the scholars, is the general evidences. So the overall evidences such as Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas, Istihsan, Masalih Mursala, and so on and so forth. The second one was أصوله دلائل الإجمال وطرق الترجيح قيد تالي. So the methods of seeking preference over from one evidence over the other. And the third one was وما الاجتهاد من شرط وضح. So the conditions of ijtihad, and along with that, the definition of a mujtahid and the levels of it, and the mufti and the mustafti and their conditions. These are the three things that are included in the knowledge of usul al-fiqh. So the first one, وعلم أصول الفقه طرقه على سبيل الإجمال. So its general methods, its general evidences, the طرق means ways or paths or roads. I don't know why it's defined as methods here. So طرق means evidences, things that lead to it. We said that the dalil is the guide to the thing that is sought after. So the general evidences وكيفية الاستدلال بها. So كيفية الاستدلال بها covers the two things we discussed, which is seeking tarjih of one thing over another, seeking preference of one evidence over another, and also in the mode of drawing, the mode of seeking evidences is who is doing this. So this is included. So the last two things, how to seek tarjih and the conditions of ijtihad, they are both included in this sentence. So the how and the who are both included in the word kayfiyya here. And then next class, inshallah, because we have 4 minutes, we're going to discuss all the titles, all the sections that are included in the study of Usul al-Fiqh. So divisions of speech, specific, al-aam wal-khas, general, specific, mujmal, al-zahir, al-mu'awwal, all these specific things. And we're going to add some additional topics from our notes. طيب, we have 3 minutes left. If anyone has any questions regarding what we talked about today or something else. Again, you can turn on, you don't have to type, you can turn on your mic. No, jazakallah khairan, jazakallah khair. Okay, nobody has any questions. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.